Coach Tanelli, welcome to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. Like we were saying off air, made an acquaintance at the Nationals, and we've been trying to get this scheduled, and here we are. I think first things first, man, just looking at your Twitter, I noticed you guys had graduation over the weekend for your senior class. How did that go, and how did the season wrap up for you guys?
It was great. I mean, we had our banquet this weekend, and then we had a couple guys go compete at Last Chance Qualifier. Following that, which is always good to have a couple guys that no matter what the situation, want to chase some extra matches. I think that's good fabric within the culture of our program. But it's exciting. We changed things up with our banquet this year. We usually do it a little closer to after the season, a couple weeks after the season to kind of put a bow on things and move toward freestyle. But this year we pushed it back a little bit and went to a new venue, and it was overall, I think, a pretty great experience. The feedback was good. So, always good to look back on what I thought was a really good season.
Yeah. And you look at the freestyle scene for your guys is so unique because of what you have going on with the New York RTC. So how does that work? When the season's done, are you guys still training at Columbia, or are they going over to Hoboken across the river?
Yeah, so we have two locations for RTC, and kind of the way it's structured is so during the academic year, say from Labor Day to this past weekend when guys finished finals, our RTC guys are coming through, say 3 times a week, coming up to the room, and then once we leave, so basically our guys are moving this weekend. Then we operate out of Hoboken exclusively. And then we'll do that through, July is kind of when we cut them. Some guys stick around in August, but ultimately that's kind of the structure that we've got in place.
That's cool because your guys get to work out with and be coached by yourself, but then also get a little mix up of Kendall and Valentine. Who are some of the RTC athletes that are with the NYRTC right now?
So with New York City, we got Jordan Oliver, we got Mitch Finesilver, Nestor DeFore has retired and now come back, so he's making his re-entry on the scene. Shelton Mack, one of our coaches as well on staff, so he trains with us. Frank Chamizo is probably the big headliner, so he's in town now getting ready. I don't think I missed anybody.
So your guys are rolling with JOs and the Chamizos of the world. I don't know how regularly, but at least a fair amount in the off season.
Absolutely. I think more than anything, it's just kind of the exposure to guys at that level, the way they think. I think when you look at Jordan specifically, he's got an amazing brain for wrestling, and what he brings to the table is it's almost more than like psychological, mental than it is physical. But you throw that in, and then we kind of always have international guys rolling in. I think in a large, or to a large extent, the international senior level guys are almost our easiest recruits, more than the high school kids, the college kids, even domestic. It's an international city, us being in New York, and so right now Ken Chadze had been in town for a couple of months training. We've had a great relationship with the Georgian national team. So Vladimir Kinchkashvili and Gino and Petrashvili and Vomtadze, all these guys have been here. We've done some exchanges in the past. So I think as far as what, experience we can provide for our student athletes, it's pretty remarkable. It's a pretty cool thing. At least what I'll say is it's a lot different than the experience I had,
Yeah. Yeah. And you were at Wisconsin for 5 years or 6 years?
5
years. I love that you brought that up because, you came up through Jersey, and I definitely want to talk about Ernie Monaco and the Edge and, the Lombardi brothers, the whole crew. But, you get out to Wisconsin. How impactful was Donnie Pritzlaff for you to get out there?
Well, I'll say this: I wouldn't have been out there if it weren't for Donnie Pritzlaff. So, and it's kind of an intertwined story when you bring up a couple of those things, and like you said, it sounds like you want to get to him, but
let's get to him right now if you want. Yeah,
Donnie actually came out of the club that Ernie Monaco ran, so out of the Edge, which is the oldest club in the nation. And, you know, historically, when you look back on it, even to this day, you know, one of the most successful clubs in the nation. So the guys that had gone on and had the, you know, the NCAA success and, you know, some international success as well. But you're looking at the likes of, you know, Donnie Pritzlaff and Glenn Pritzlaff, Steve Mocco, Zach Esposito, Joe Dubuque, Matt Valenti. Those are just the, you know, some of the national champions. Darian Caldwell. I know Molinaro, you know, was, you know, he rolled through the club. But then you look at the All-Americans that have come out with, you know, myself and Mike Gray, and I mean the lineage. It's really, it's pretty wild when you think about it. Corey Cooperman and Kurt Backus. There's
and
just
even probably like every state has those guys that were like phenoms in high school but never went on. I'm sure there's a ton of guys who are like New Jersey legends that never even materialized in D1 that went there as well.
Sure. I think that's like kind of the craziest thing. Most of the phenoms that came out of there did materialize in college. You know, when you really break it down, and I think that's what made him really, really unique. And by him, I mean Ernie Monaco is his ability. It was so much more. There was, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of technique. There's a lot of breakdown. There's some really advanced stuff going on in that room. But I always say it's like, it's more what we learn. Like he taught us how to learn more than what to learn. And it's funny when like this past weekend, I'm at Last Chance Qualifier and Northeast regions are going on at the same time in Atlantic City, and Glenn Pritzlaff's there, right? So Glenn's a national champ, wrestled at Penn State, and obviously a different generation from me. But the what's crazy is we speak the same language always, like all these edge guys, right? And there's, I think, kind of to what you're saying, there's a lot of, you know, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I actually was speaking with Ernie this weekend because he was there coaching, and Glenn was there helping him out. But it's like there's like a difference between edge guys and guys that went to the edge, and I think it's a pretty unique spin. But I'll say, as far as like edge guys, I mean, they did materialize in college.
Right.
But again, it's because we're all wired the same. He hardwired us psychologically and stylistically we're different. You know, Dave Esposito, you know, is a 2-time All-American and national finalist. He couldn't be a cooler cat, but he processes and competes in a way that all of us had that same kind of fire. And I'm probably giving myself a little bit too much credit, throwing myself in there. So a large edge guy community, I'll say. So again, coming back to the original question, I wouldn't have gone there. You know, I think for me specifically, I was compared to Donnie in high school, and had, you know, been around him a little bit and a couple limited interactions, but I think it was more, you know, my coach telling me and Ernie telling me that, hey, you're like this guy. Yeah, I have no idea. What this guy is even like. But if he's saying it and he hasn't steered me wrong yet, well, then I'm probably like him. And so to me, it was almost really easy.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to go to Wisconsin. You know, that's where Donnie went, and he won 2 national titles, and that's where I was going to go and win 3 national titles. And you know, that didn't materialize the way I had planned, but
yeah.
But it was again, to circle back, I would have never been there ever.
So you mentioned Ernie taught you how to learn, not just what to learn. Do you remember anything specific as to how he did that, or what he did to convey that?
Ernie is a storyteller, and he's a guy that he could relate to anybody, right? And he was so good through telling stories of like creating these visuals in your mind that like you'd always reference back. I mean, I've been out of college coaching for 13 years, or I have no idea how long it is, but it's like I still use the same stories, the same like versions of these stories that I heard from him, because it gives that visualization attachment that guys can come back to and latch into, and he's just his demeanor, everything about him is like really, it's pretty impactful, right? He's emotional. He's like one of the most emotional guys, or I'll say maybe not emotional, but the most in touch with his emotions, ability to be vulnerable and to like, it's the stuff that really matters. When I think about men, when I think about the manliest men, I don't think about muscles and fighting. And, I think about men that are willing to show themselves who they really are. And, he's a great father. He's a great husband. He's committed. Like he walked the whole picture, the whole gamut he ran. And because of that, it was like attached with the wrestling, the technical side of it. He was ahead of his time for video and the more specifically like the international guys that we were watching all the time. I grew up watching Fitsayev and Satiev, and it certainly seemed like I had no like no one else was doing that. But you lump all those things together, and then again, I think the biggest thing is like he's a storyteller.
Yeah. And it's like,
it made a difference.
I didn't mean to, I thought you were done there. Sorry, but I was just get so excited talking about this because I heard you say that like the way he talked about wrestling was unique, even like the way he communicated like what wrestling was and how impactful it is different than anywhere else you've heard it.
100%. Yeah. And I think for me, it was almost easy. I started wrestling really late. I started wrestling in 6th grade. So I didn't know any better, So I just like, I was kind of handed like through luck, through circumstance a little bit, but like, I just kind of was in like an empty book. And like, he was able to fill the pages himself. I was an empty book and he's just like writing, this is what you're supposed to think. So I was like, oh, okay, this is what I think. And I'm like, I'm crazy. So I believed it, and that's really, when I look at my child, like I look at my childhood and it's like, all I needed was someone to really guide me, and kind of keep me honest, keep me accountable. So he kept me on the rails. His wife kept me on the rails. And it was a recipe for like destruction. We destroyed people with that recipe. And that was a pretty cool thing. And then you build momentum and you're like, well, why actually I should never doubt this guy. Whatever he says, I'll do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's like some of the core things I've read about trust. It's like, you have to believe that the guy has competency and he has to be consistent and you have to believe he cares, right? So like the competency, you just saw that because you saw all these other legends in there. And then the consistency, it sounds like he was always there for you. And then the care, I'm getting that from you as well. When you think about like some of the more important things of like mental development, such as like the conversation we have with ourselves and visualization, did he ever talk about that kind of stuff in terms of like what you should be telling yourself and what you should be expecting of yourself?
Yeah, always. I think like the biggest you're talking about, and even before I brushed over, but like specific things he used to talk about. And it ties into what you're saying now is like, everything has to be based around your performance. And I think in this country, in this sport, we focus so much on results. And don't get me wrong, like results matter, right? We're in the positions we're at without certain results. You can't earn that scholarship without having certain results. We're not just giving them out to people, right? But the truth is, and where I think when you talk to the more of the higher levels of guys that have the best success, they've unlocked their wrestling ability by taking off the handcuffs. And what I mean is like they're performing with themselves. They're not performing. Kyle Snyder isn't performing, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's like he's not competing against Sajalayev. He's competing against himself. And if he executes his game plan, it doesn't matter who it is that's across from him in blue. It's like he's going to execute and he's going to win. And I think there was a huge emphasis on that. And I'm sorry, Kyle, if you ever listened to this and heard that, and that's not the case. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but to me, it's like I listen to how the guy speaks, and it sounds so consistent. Like wrestling isn't the most important thing. It's how he approaches wrestling. That's important. His faith is important, and whether that's in God or in your family and the son, I don't care what it is. Like there's just more important things. So I think that was something that was super, super important with Ernie is we got to get away. We got to take the handcuffs off. And you guys put so much pressure on yourselves to win, whether it's because your dad's crazy or your mother's not going to feed you for a week or whatever it is. Like you do this for you. And there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes out of knowing that you could wrestle well and lose. Like that's a concept that people don't get in this sport. You can wrestle well and lose. And guess what? You can wrestle poorly and win. And that's like, it's honestly like the worst, most like damaging thing to your progress. Because then you latch onto these winning habits, instead of really like the true crux of what's making you win or lose.
Yeah. And it's relieving to hear that from a coach too, that even if I lose, if I wrestle well and I improve on certain things, it's a win in that category, in the sense of, you know, hey, last time I was really struggling with this shot defense, and now, you know, I'm improving on that even though I lost, you know. So as a kid, it's relieving to hear and takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah. I think the reality too is you're going to fix that, but then you get to the next round of the tournament. You know what I mean? And then now you're in the semis instead of the quarters, and in the semis that it's cranked up another level. So now there's always this growth. And if you're unwilling to grow, or you're so set on the fact that you're there, you're going to get passed. And again, look at the best guys in our country right now. I think, like, use Jordan as Burroughs as an example. That guy has evolved so much over time. And why? Like, there's a lot of reasons, obviously, but it's like the guy, he doesn't see himself as the best. And
Right.
he's the reigning world champ at 79 kilos, but it's like, there's a lot of world champs. He's got to be a 2-time world champ. Okay. I won the Olympics. I got to win it twice. I got to beat John. I got to, like, it's always reframing that's going on. But I think, like, then you look at his wrestling I mean, you can't say he's lost his step, but I'm sure he might not be firing in exactly the same way he was when he was 23, but he's certainly winning. And why? He's not just an athlete. It's like a crazy thing. When I hear people talk about Jordan, and they're like, oh, he's so athletic. Well, listen, he's athletic, but it's a disservice to his wrestling. The guy's one of the best hand fighters in the country. For him to hold off Andrew Howe, you know, who was a teammate of mine, who was, you know, I think the second best guy in the world at the time, you know, that guy was a hand fighter. Well, how can Jordan beat him if he can't hand fight? Because Andrew's going to pull him in the mud with him. Like, I think it's just like a disservice to the guy.
And also his like mental toughness. Like, how many times has he been down late, 10 seconds left, and he gets it done? Like, mental toughness isn't the right word. It's just like being able to perform when you're the absolute most tired you'll ever be, with the highest possible stakes. Like, he is like the guy with 10 seconds left.
Yeah. But I think it's just like, you know, it's just, he's never satisfied. He's always competing with himself. That's it. And again, I'm putting words in mouths of people other than myself. So apologies if that's not the case, but it's more a matter of respect for those guys that I try to generalize, but probably a little out of bounds. So apologies.
Well, I think you're spot on, because yeah, I mean, look at the evolution JB's had. And going back to the Edge, I've always curious, you know, I'm a big Illinois guy. Is the Edge like a club where like 7th and 8th graders will compete for the Edge at the Jersey Middle School State Championships? Or is it more of like a kind of like a freestyle thing in the off season?
I don't know how it's evolved. When I was growing up, though, you competed still for your grade
Club
school
team.
No, you like your whatever township you were from, or whatever city you were from. I have no idea what you'd call it, but
Right.
there were a couple like regional schools that seemed like clubs. But yeah, I don't think at least myself, and I've been like an Edge kid, you know, an Edge guy from day one. Like, I never competed for Edge, really. I always competed for my high school.
So how often were you going there in the season?
Oh, like definitely 3 days a week for sure. I mean, they're practicing 2 or 3 days, but you know, whether it was I'm picking up an extra workout or individual or two with Ernie and with some other guys.
Yeah. It's just interesting to look at when you started. You know, 6th grade isn't that late, but I guess now especially is, but back then it may not have been. But like, Were there some growing pains for you kind of getting over that hump, or was it something that just came natural to you?
Um, I was, I mean, yes, there's growing pains. I feel
Right,
like,
right.
I'm not an egomaniac. I got my butt kicked. I think so. Like, I'm a twin actually, and like my twin brother and I both picked it up fast. But my twin brother was like really good. He was really good, and he was double jointed in his shoulders, and he kind of had it going on. He figured it out. I mean, he placed. We both started in sixth grade. I think the guy placed third in the rec states in New Jersey is a pretty good state. Like, or maybe it was fifth, but he like 3 months into wrestling. It's pretty impressive. I
Wow.
think I think for me, I I again, I'm gonna sound like a knucklehead, but it's like I felt like I was a tough kid. I always identified with grit and with toughness and wanting the challenge. And um I really liked the competitive side of it, and like just the hyper competitiveness behind wrestling. So I loved that side of it. And I think that's more or less what motivated me. I couldn't, I, there were a lot of guys obviously that were better than me, but I never believed once that I wrestled anybody that I thought they were better than me ever. From,
Really?
from, from the first time I wrestled, I never thought I should lose a match. It's funny. I'm talking with my wife the other day. My wife and Ernie have a relationship, and they've talked, and it cracks me up. Literally yesterday is the first day I'm at the park with my kids, and she's like, yeah, like Ernie literally said, like, you probably thought you were better than you were, like, and it's true. But I'm like, yeah, it's his fault though. He created these layers of body armor that you put on to, like, of course, how could I lose? How could I lose? When you know how hard you train, when you know how well prepared you are, how could you lose? And in reality, I'd have it no other way. But I'll tell you, like, and I'm not lying. I didn't think I should lose a match ever from the first time I stepped on the mat to not. And I loved the pressure. Really, like, I felt the bigger the match, the better I performed, which
Yeah.
was another thing that another like Ernieism, type of situation was, there's too many practice room wrestlers, and the real guys are the ones that, not that stink in the wrestling room, but the ones that could, on the biggest stage, wrestle the best.
He would shoot it straight like that.
Oh yeah.
Any other Ernieisms you can think of that you still use on a daily basis with your guys?
Uh yeah. I mean, more jokes than not.
Yeah.
I do a lot, like what Ernie did really well, which is where I think Ernie was drawn to me. And again, we've talked about some of these things and we haven't talked about others, but I mean, I'm a pretty sarcastic guy, so it comes off pretty easily for me. But he would drop jokes in practice. He'd be teaching technique and he'd say something and it would seem like silly, but the truth is he was like testing the audience to see who was paying attention. And it wasn't, it was a dad joke,
Mm-hmm.
um, or it was just a little like poking at someone or something. And you go, you'd like snicker. And he always caught on who was snickering, or you know then because he'd look around and he'd see the other kids playing with their shoelaces. This guy's counting the hair on his arms that just sprouted up last week. The other kid's staring at his dad in the window because dad is you got to pay attention. Like, who knows? So, but it was like a brake check.
Yeah.
When you're driving, your brake check to see if the guy he's gonna hit you, or what do you do? Like, he'd like brake check the crowd to see, are you paying attention? Like, are you actually listening? Like, because again, we haven't talked about it, but it's like what he was saying was so much more important than what he was showing. The
Mm-hmm.
psychological aspect of it, it was crucial. And man, I remember, like, it was early. It was like seventh grade. I was going there. And how they had the old edge, the location has changed a couple of times, and this isn't their first location, but it's one of their first. Was in Kenilworth, and they had this one window, like plexiglass or whatever it was, but they couldn't hear what was going on. So it was a closed wall, and then just a window, and then the locker room door, and you access that from the backside. And I just remember my old man. My old man was a baseball player and pretty good, but had no idea about wrestling. So he doesn't know, which was good. Again, more of a blank slate for Ernie to mold me than him.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one day we're driving home and he's like, "Hey, Zach," he's like, "What are you guys talking about so much in there?" Like, Ernie's notorious. It's a slow practice. I mean, it's a slow practice. And that sounds negative, but it's not. It was like he talked. He made you understand why it was important, why we were doing it. Because then when you believed in why, it was easier to tap into it instead of this is how you do it. And 100 moves. I'd rather recruit a kid that knows 3 moves and does them well than a kid that knows 300 moves and can't execute any of them in a match, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was more foundations and principles, and then obviously some higher level stuff that we played with. But I remember my dad, he asked me, he's like, "Hey, what is going on in there? Like, all the parents, I keep hearing all the parents and they're frustrated, Zach." He's like, "Why aren't you guys wrestling more? It's wrestling practice. Why aren't you wrestling more?" And I said, "Those parents are idiots." I said, they can't hear, so they don't know. But if their kids aren't saying, like, I just got it at an early age. I'm like, what he's saying is so much more important than what he's showing.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to listen. If you're not listening, then that's it. You'll never be an edge guy if you're not soaking it in.
It's insane that even though you had a mastermind on the other side of that glass wall and Ernie, you still had parents on the other side thinking they knew better about pushing the kids hard or not practicing hard enough. Like, even the great Ernie Monaco has to deal with parents questioning practices and stuff like that.
Yeah, I could really go off on one about that right now, but I mean, that's everybody, and that's, I will say it's kind of New Jersey. It's every state, I think, to an extent, and some higher level players, but everyone knows better. And nowadays, where everyone has their own individual coach and a dietitian, I mean, you got high school kids that have their dietitian and their strength coach, and then they have their team practice, and then they have their individual coach, and it's kind of gotten out of control where there's too many too many chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of loyalty either. So, and to some extent, it's like it used to be you go to high school and then you had a club. Now it's like your club is your high school, and you go to like 6 clubs, and this is where the best workout is. So I'm going to go there, but I'm going to do individuals with this guy. And the reality is, I don't know. Listen, we're succeeding and kids are they might be getting to the next level, but they're so confused. And like, honestly, for me, those are the hardest kids to coach too. I like the loyalty aspect because what it brings is, listen, like, Ryan, your single leg might be world class. My single leg might, like, who knows, there's 6 different world-class techniques for a single leg that you're gonna be exposed to in those coaches you're going and seeing. But the reality is you're better off hearing from one of them than all 6, because how I apply shoulder pressure and how I'm driving off my feet to create that pressure is different than how, Eric Guerrero does it, is different than how Kale does it. And both of which might be great, but the reality is I need to get proficient in one. And then if I can do that, I'm going to succeed. I'm going to be able to beat 95 guys, 95% of the guys with one solid one instead of having a feel for all of them.
Yeah, and it's so counter to how the Russians think about coaching too. It's like coach for life there. And like Sergey, him and his twin brother moved to another country to follow their coach. And it's different if you don't have a proven coach, but if you're lucky enough to live near Chicago, where there's great coaches, or New York City, where you can get to the edge, it's like at that point, just stick with one and roll with it all the way through if you can, and
yeah, I say it to this day. I wonder, and I had my best friend growing up, he wrestled at Penn, and he actually coached with me here at Columbia my first year, but he and I used to stay in touch quite a bit. So Zach Shanneman was his name. But he and I talked all throughout college, and we just like kind of wondered to an extent, like, what our course would have been had Ernie been our college, like had it been that way, more of an
Yes.
international foreign system of like, you have a coach for life. That's it. You are his guy. He is your, like, you are his property to an extent. Let's not get crazy. But like, that's like with him, because the trust was so high, we were firing on all cylinders. And then we had to learn a different system. Was that the best thing? And
Yeah.
then again, that's like for me having like trying to have some foresight, like that's where I had to, like, at least Donnie was a consistent voice, was a consistent like philosophy that I knew I was going to inherit a lot of those same attributes, just in a different tone, different delivery.
Yeah. And you think, about when you got to Wisconsin, you had Donnie there, and just by looking at brackets, you could tell you changed weights your junior year. And I had read that you would get really heavy when you were down at 133. But then I also noticed, like, when you were back in high school, you were sucking a lot to get to 112. So, like, what was Ernie's take on some of the weight cutting back then?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That I mean, we did what we had to do. So I went in to high school, I was 112, and then my sophomore year, I cut a lot of weight to go to 112 again. My training partner was Matt Valenti. We did private, like, individuals together. We both came out of the same club. Matt was a better wrestler than me at that time, for sure. And I wanted to win. And I just felt like, man, we're gonna run it. I forget who it was at 103. Like, I thought Edge could have a head, like I have a lot of pride in being from the Edge, and like, and I'm a hyper competitive, so I wanted to win. So I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to cut. We'll win 12 and 19 with Valenti going there. But
and then college, was it a pretty big one there once you got into like the swing of things at 133, like your junior year?
It was big my freshman year. So like I went,
Oh, wow.
so I moved up in high school to 35 my last 2 years, and that was good. But I went to college as a 41 pounder. And I got, we had an All-American, a 2-time All-American in front of me who was injured. He had a tough neck, like a bad neck. And he would go in the lineup and not, especially in the beginning of the season, but and they worked him in. And that's fair. I mean, he was a better wrestler than me, no problem. But we were getting killed. Our backup was getting beat up pretty bad. And I mean, like, techs and pins. And in the Big Ten, you can't be giving up bonus points like that. So I was like, hey, I'll cut. I'll go down. I'll do it for the team. And to a large extent, like, it kind of pigeonholed me there. It was a hard cut. I wasn't a good weight cutter to begin with. And with my style, like how I wrestled hard. And my biggest attribute was my strength and my conditioning, both of which were pretty significantly compromised when I was cutting weight. So I would have it some days and I wouldn't have it others. So it was how did the weight cut go? So then you're spending the first period trying to figure out, was it a good weight cut or was it not?
These are internal thoughts you're having, like, during a match?
No, but like in retrospect, you're like you can't. It doesn't matter how tough you are. When you have a bad weight cut, you have a bad weight cut, and there's no toughness that's going to get you through it. I mean, you got it in the tank or you don't. So there's some feeling out. Like, inherently, you're going to feel it out. Are my legs underneath me this match? Am I going to be able to go the pace that I need to go in order to put myself in the best position to win? Right.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to that identity of, like, what does it mean for me to wrestle a perfect match? What does it mean for me to compete with myself and, like, to perform to my optimal ability? I have to wrestle hard. I wrestled hard. I was not the best wrestler, but I wrestled hard. And that was my biggest strength. So at 33, that was in question, right? And I did it my whole career. I got pigeonholed because I'm short, and I was the shortest 41 pounder in the country. But it was actually, like, my senior year is actually when I moved up. I was 33 my first 4 years, and then only my senior year did I go up to 41. And that's where, again, I never had to worry about, were my legs underneath me. And that's where my consistency, I proved consistently that I was able to perform at X level with myself, and the results followed.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that, because I never cut as nearly as much weight as you're talking about, but, to know that if you don't do it right, like if you get way heavy on Monday, you come in at like 155 and that tapers off, perform no matter what, you're not going to be able to wrestle to your ability. And that's just a lot of people forget about that's how much weight we're talking here.
Well, what round do you see the most upsets at NCAAs? It's the quarterfinals.
After the day 2 cut?
After
day 1 cut. Yeah.
After the day 1 cut, how are you going to respond? And a lot of times, like up until I want to say this year, first day was 2 hour, and then it was back to a 1 hour weigh-in on Friday. So on day 2 of nationals. So like if you knew you were going against a weight cutter, like you wanted them in the quarterfinals. Yeah. But like, so for what you're just saying, yeah, I was 133. And again, I'm not proud of this, but like my body was in such shutdown mode. Like I would retain everything. And I ate well. I mean, I could have done things a lot better, but it's not like I was eating terribly. I'd have some, a snack here and there, but like I ate and I drank well and I did all these things, but I'd bounce up to 52. Meanwhile, when I went to 41, I never hit 52 ever. Like I was.
So you would come in on Monday morning at the workout, and you're stepping on there and it's north of 150.
Seldomly, but yes, 40. I mean, but high 40s, definitely high 40s. Consistently 48, 49, 50.
Like if you're below 45, that's a shock coming in on Monday.
Yeah, I don't know if it happened.
Wow.
But meanwhile, I'm making 41 and my body was regulated. If I hit 150, I was like, this is weird. Like, what's going on? And then as I got closer to a weigh-in, my weight actually went up. I think that was like, there's like a 3% or 4% rule. Like I was competing in practice. By the time it was live, I was weighing what I would weigh when I actually competed. So I was weighing 145, 146. And that's like realistically where I competed. So again, everything was scripted. Everything was known how I was going to perform. And that was probably that's, if I had a regret, that would be it, that I didn't put my foot down and dig my heels in, I should say, and say, man, I'm going 41.
Well, that was kind of the apex of the story. Is what I wanted to ask is, now if you're talking to guys on your team or just any college wrestler, do you think it was so much that you were too nervous to say something, or you said something and then they relented? In which case, that's a little bit different story. But I'm just curious, like what advice you'd give to kids who may be in that kind of situation. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this, and I laugh. I don't mean to laugh. I laugh because if you know me, I'm never really afraid to say anything. Like I speak my mind pretty freely. But I'll say this: it's like, listen, I'm a college coach and I recruit. And that obviously that comes up quite a bit in the recruiting process. Is what this weight and what if I'm not that weight? I think the reality is this: you have to go your optimal weight. For me, my optimal weight was 141. But I didn't realize that. I convinced myself because, I had some people in my camp that convinced me of it, and I'm trying to be a soldier, that 33 was my optimal weight. But the reality is you have to go your optimal weight. If you can't make the team, if you can't make the lineup at your optimal weight, now we have to look at other options, right? If you want to be in the lineup, or you got to relegate yourself to being the best backup in the country. I don't know. For me, that really wasn't it. My freshman year was enough. I wasn't the guy at 33. Now I know I could have been the guy at 41, and that's, a different story. But the reality is, like, how do we go about it, or how do I view it? It's you got to go your optimal weight. Where are you going to, like, when you go to bed, what are you dreaming about? You're winning the NCAAs at this weight. When you're in class and you're, doodling, I can't tell you the times I wrote the, 2008 Big Ten champ, 2009 Big Ten champ, whatever, NCAA champ. Yeah. Like, what weight is that at? So that's your weight class. But if you if you are, if you're 149, if your optimal weight is 149 and you're at Cornell, and your name's not Yanni Diakomahalis, you're not a 49 pounder.
Right.
That's it,
Or you're not a Cornell wrestler.
Or you're not well, yeah, I guess now it's, it's a little touchy because of the transfer portal. I have no one, that's everyone's situation now. But but so that, I think that's it. So you either got to decide, are you going up or are you going down? And then that's it. Like, you are you are a 33 pounder, or you are a 49 pounder. You're no longer that 41 pounder until the season is over. Like, you got to commit.
Yeah, because especially when recruiting, you think back to your time at the Big Ten, where there's scholarship money on the line, that it's big stakes. They're recruiting based on where they think you're going to be. So there's a level of commitment there, I would imagine, that goes into some of the planning. So before you got into the thick of the season at Wisconsin, and when you're almost entirely focused on the weight cut, like when you're getting in there your first year, was the training that Donnie, and obviously Coach Davis, but I imagine Donnie was doing a lot of it, was the training early on a shock, or were you pretty ready for the training and like the physicality of Division I wrestling?
No, I was ready for it psychologically. I mean, physically, there's an acclimation period, right? Like, you're gonna be sore in ways and in places that you didn't know you were capable of being sore. But again, I think Ernie he made it really clear, like, you're not going to be the best guy in the room. If you are, you chose the wrong school. Like, you can't be the best guy in the room by your sophomore year. That's a bad problem to have. And I won't say who, but that was an issue for one of the foreign edge guy that came before me. So that was something we were really worried about. Not worried about, but something I was really cognizant of in the recruiting process. But I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't expect to be the best guy. I also had I just wasn't the best guy. I was the toughest guy, but I wasn't the best guy. I had a long ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, nothing's a quick story because I take after Ernie, but it's like my first college practice was we went in and it was Barry that ran it, but we went in, we did a little bit of drilling, and this was like Big Ten back in the day anyway. It's just like you go in, you kind of warm up and you wrestle live. But first practice and all the incoming freshmen, we had the number one recruiting class in the country, so it was a good class. But 60-minute go on the clock, right? And for me, I always believed that, like, I should grab the best guy as often as possible and train. And getting my butt kicked is like, I personally, because I'm so competitive, I will crack the case. I will figure it out. The more reps I get on that guy, the more I will figure out a way to beat him. But I grabbed a guy, Tony Black, who was a stud and NCAA All-American. He was helping out at the time. I knew he was good, but I guess I didn't really know how he wrestled. So he was really, really good on top.
Ooh.
And
Oh no,
I'm holding my own. I mean, it's a 60-minute go. I'm holding my own. It's like 2 minutes in, 2.5 minutes in. And then I gave up a takedown. And then 57 minutes, 57.5 minutes, I got ridden. And I don't mean ridden. I got tortured. And again, it wasn't like a hard it was hard psychologically to an extent, but not ever like close to breaking. It was just like, I got a lot to work on. But to answer the question, it's like, nah, I felt comfortable with what I was getting myself into in the Big Ten. And it's honestly where it wasn't really a decision. I knew I had to go somewhere in the Big Ten. And where you're going to get, like, Tony, I would ask Tony to wrestle all the time, because of that. And that's something that Tony respected. I think about me, if I were to look back on it in our conversation since college, he liked the fact that he had a kid that had no right being on the mat with them, but was willing to do it all the time to get better.
And the fact that you didn't break or start throwing elbows after like minute 30 of being a road is freaking out kind of thing is a testament,
Yeah. I mean, I wrestled hard. I don't think I was cheap though. I'd rather just stand up and fight than, I'd rather just say, hey, okay, you're going to beat me in wrestling. But I'm going to fight. So let's fight. I never wanted to be I never wanted to be cheap, man. I don't like that. I never liked that. And for me, I learned, because I was I'd say I had some anger issues. That's something where, like, Ernie helped me so much, was like trying reframe it, and like it became like, okay, crack my neck. All right, you want to get tough? I can get tough. Like that. You want to fight? I can fight. And like that's where Donnie took over. And I'm thinking about a match, particularly, at NCAA's my senior year. It's funny, but I'll never forget it. Was like, I had a guy that I had previously wrestled and had a good performance against, and then I'm wrestling him, and he had a bone to pick, and he came across the line. He headbutted me. I thought I broke my nose off. He headbutted me and high crotched me and tomahawked me down. And I was like, I hadn't been shook really like ever. And I woke up and I looked at Donnie and Donnie, I was like, what the heck was that? And he just looked at me and he's like, he wants to make it a fight. Let's make it a fight. And it like snapped me back. I'm like, oh, well, I'm good at that. And then, then everything was back on track, but it's funny, but I never wanted to be dirty, never wanted to be cheap.
And what do you think back on, working with Donnie for those years? Did you pick up from him that you didn't already have from Ernie? Was there anything that stood out? Was there a special thing about that relationship?
Yeah, I'll say the special thing about that relationship was the amount he invested in me. I think I'm a fierce loyalist. Like, and I mean, like people talk about loyalty. I have a really, I don't know how to describe it. I have a real loyalty to people and people that have done right by me, and to my detriment, it hurts when people do wrong by me. I'm always working on that, on recovering. And I think for my childhood, a lot of these things served me well. And as I've matured, as I've gotten into different side of wrestling, right, and coaching, like we have to evolve, we have to grow. But I guess what I'd say is like I was really, really loyal to Donnie, and he was really loyal to me. And I think that's what it was like, and it evolved over time, but eventually it just became, you do this, okay, like that's it, I'm just going to do it. But where Donnie really helped me was just overall confidence. Like I've always believed in myself, I always knew, but Donnie had like he empowered me to have that like it factor. I mean, he's one of the hardest dudes. He's just a hard dude. That's it. And that's like one of the biggest compliments I can give someone. And to the same extent that like being a wimp would be one of the worst insults I can give you. Donnie's a hard dude. But he is a has empathy. He's got tremendous relation skills, and he let me in to him and his family and his kids, and it was good. So I think more than anything, it was just like having a guy that I knew. He maybe never even told me, but he believed in me. He never told me you're going to be a national champ, but I knew that he knew I was going to be a national champ without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that's for me more than anything technical you can ever show me is just belief. Belief in me was going to be the key to my heart and my success.
And I looked at your career, and obviously All-American, 3-time qualifier, but maybe one of the biggest moments you said you had was when you won the Midlands in 2008. Why was that?
Well, I think there's a difference between knowing you can be the guy and being the guy, right? And especially like I had a chip on my shoulder. And I think when you're climbing the mountain, you have to have that chip on your shoulder, right? But I went in there, and again, it's silly. It's funny because it came up yesterday when I was talking to Ernie, because Ernie has used this tactic with other guys that he's coaching, and one that matters a lot to him. But it was the first tournament I didn't look at a bracket, and I just like committed. I just said, I'm done with this. I had so many issues getting back to Wisconsin from winter break or whatever. You get a week off or whatever it was, but we had some bad weather out east, and I couldn't get back to Madison on the 26th, and then it was the 27th, and then my flight got canceled then. And then it's the 28th, and I got a report, so I ended up just getting a flight to Chicago, and I meet the team. So my mind was almost distracted elsewhere. Like, am I even going to be able to get there? How am I going to get my weight down? What am I doing for practice? All this stuff. And it kind of in that madness, I forgot about wrestling. And I warmed up, I felt good, but I was like, I'm done with this. Screw this. I'm done. I don't care who I'm wrestling. It doesn't matter. And like really, like truly, genuinely did not matter who I was wrestling. Everyone says that, right? But like I gave up. I said, I'm done. So I didn't look at the bracket, and I went there and I just said, okay, who's there? Who's in front of me? And I was just like, it was the first time in my career that I was really, truly present. It didn't matter. And I went out and I rolled through a pretty good bracket, had some decent guys, and beat the kid ranked number 1 in the country. And then I think number 1 and number 2. But again, it just became about me. It was always about me. But that unlocked it. And that to me is why that was not because I won. Winning was a byproduct of my approach to the competition. And I think that was why that was the best thing, because it finally came together, and it was coming together at the right time. Now my body, like, I'm at the right weight class, I'm feeling good. And now psychologically, I'm connecting all the pieces.
And Monaco still uses that?
Yeah.
So he's still coaching.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
He's still in it. And but yeah, one of his good guys was a Jersey State champ this weekend, and someone I'm close with. I coach his brother actually on my college team now, and this kid's he's gonna have a great career. But I actually was there at the tournament and had a little bit of a break, and I'm like, who you wrestling next? He's like, I don't know. And Ernie's right there, and he's like, yeah, Midlands. I'm like, what? He's like, ever since I told him the Midland story, he doesn't look at the bracket. He doesn't care.
I got to get Monaco on this podcast, man. This guy
you better carve out a couple hours though.
I'm going to come out to Jersey for that one. I'm just going to come out and spend a couple days. Yeah.
He's the one, man. He's the one. And I know you had, forgetting his name, but with the Harvey Twisters and
Coach Quint. Yeah.
Sorry. And I coach a Twister now. Shame on me for forgetting his name, but
no problem, man. Every state has theirs,
He's the guy. Ernie would be the guy to get on and pick his brain and just let, kind of, you need 2 questions and he'll run for 2 hours.
Well, I love that. I'm from the Midwest, and, East Coasters, they have a way about them in terms of it just seems to me, every guy I know from the edge or from Jersey, just naturally a self-confident person and carries themselves, kind of in a gregarious, outgoing way. And they always, just great communicators. I don't know always, but great communicators. And he seems like he's like just the godfather of that, just kind of like just a puppet master, and each person's an individual and he knows how to speak to everybody.
Yeah, I'd agree with that,
Yeah.
Listen, for every guy there's 20 that weren't, though. You know what I mean? True. So it's like, I wouldn't say he has favorites, but he's got guys that he connects with. Like, he's a human. So humans connect with humans. They like certain humans more than other humans. And I think it's all relational. And he's like the king of relations. Mm-hmm. And he can sense loyalty. He can sense competitiveness. He can sense he's got this formula, right? And it's all these ingredients that go into it. And he sees 6 of the 10 needed in you, and he can put 2 of the other ones in, and then we got to figure out the last 2 or whatever it is. But like, if it's just 1 or 2 ingredients, he's not that he's not going to mess around, but there's more juice to squeeze in someone else potentially. So but he's just, I'll say this. I think a lot of I have an identity as a coach, right? What I'm looking for in the recruiting process. And I hold myself accountable to stay true to that, and I can't tell you the amount of good recruits that I've walked out on this year. Like, I'm telling you, I would never, but it's like, right. I've got 2 recruits on from this year's class that I'm just like, hey, sorry, man, we're going to back out. I wish you the best of luck. And it doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. I mean, these kids have potential to be very successful, but I'm just like, listen, it's not going to be the right fit here. And it could be the right fit at Penn State or Cornell or Maryland. I don't care where it is, like, for some coach. But to me, that's the most important thing in the recruiting process, in the coaching athlete relationship is the fit. And to me, I'm no different than Ernie in that sense. And I'm proud of that I know what's going to work for me, and I know what's not going to work for me. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying you're not going to be successful, but this is not the program you're going to have the most success in. And I'd rather have the 3rd place finisher at Fargo that we're speaking the same language, mm-hmm. as opposed to the guy that won it, and I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And you look at like Donnie at Wisconsin, and again, I use Andrew Howe as an example because I love Andrew, and he's a good epitome of what that program kind of looked like. But Andrew was a top recruit, but he wasn't the top recruit. There were a couple of guys at his weight that were ranked ahead of him, but the guy couldn't have chose a better program than, or a better coach than Donnie stylistically for him.
Yep.
And it's like everyone saw it, and it's like, ah, man, they even start to look like each other over
They
time.
do look
You know what I mean?
alike, yeah.
But that's it. And now with Andrew, he's strong enough mentally and everything. He probably would have had a lot of success somewhere else. But I don't know. I question if he would have been as successful had he not gone with Donnie because of the fit.
Right. So outside of anything character-wise, right? You find out a recruit's just a liar, he has bad grades, whatever. Barring any of that stuff, you have a solid recruit. He's in your pipeline. What is something a recruit would do or say that would say that's not a good fit for Columbia, in case someone's listening, right? Or you could take another way. What are you looking for in a guy that to you is that's a slam dunk? We want him here.
Yeah, it's tough to answer fully honest in there. And that's just full disclosure. I mean, listen, we're in the Ivy League, and I think the reality is like Columbia, we've come a long way, and I really feel I'm really proud of the ground we've covered in my 6 years here. But I think the biggest transformation we've made, and a lot of things that come up, like for me in the recruiting process, and I say it intentionally in front of parents to elicit a response and to hear what they say. We don't want student athletes. I want athlete students, right? And I think there's this big misconception in the Ivy League that, like it's all academics, and maybe our administrations think that way. Maybe the universities think that way. But I'm a Division I head wrestling coach, and wrestling really matters to me.
So you say you want the athlete students?
100%.
Love it.
I don't want student athletes. I don't want kids that are using wrestling to get into school.
Right.
Like that's it. I don't need a kid that wants to go to an Ivy League school and that's their dream. There's too many good kids that's not the case. And they will use wrestling to get the best education possible, but they're not using wrestling to get an Ivy League degree. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's kind of, well, it's not their fault, right? But they don't know how hard it is to be an All-American. They don't know how hard it is to be a national champ. Shoot, now it's never been harder to qualify for the national tournament. When I was coming out, it was like, you say I'm a 3-time national qualifier. I wasn't a starter my freshman year. Otherwise, it was nothing, and that's like, I hope you or people listening don't misinterpret that. It's just like, it was never my goal to be a national qualifier.
Right,
so,
right.
But now I look at it and I'm like, man, being a national, like, I'm not saying it's what you're shooting for all the time, but like, it's hard. It's hard to be a national qualifier. So I guess the point I'm making is these parents, these kids, these high school kids, and I mean, even the best high school kids, they have no idea how hard it is to be an All-American. Mm-hmm. So when you're getting kids that aren't passionate about wrestling, they're passionate about, school, and then using wrestling, when they get punched in the mouth, their first year, their first practice, they're hitting the GW bridge. They're walking home. They're driving. They're not coming back.
And they're already into school, so they don't care.
And they don't care, right?
Right.
So like, we don't get walk-ons here. You'd have to have a 15, 20, or a 34 on your ACT to get into school here. So it's like, we're not getting walk-on. So when we lose a guy, we can't fill him in with another walk-on and an in-state guy. So to me, like, retention is key. And I'd rather have, like, as far as the culture, which is like the thing I'm single-handedly like most proud of with where we're at as a program right now, is like, the culture has to be strong, and it has to be a wrestling culture. And we have a wrestling culture. Now we're working on, executing and getting that first guy back on the stand and being in the finals, and we're close. But I guess, like, that's as far as I'll go with it to answer your question. Yep. I will point blank say we want athlete students. We don't want student athletes. And I guess I qualify it by, like, in doing that, we've gotten more highly competitive kids, like just overall competitors. And like, our academics have never been in a better place. We have more academic All-Americans than we've ever had in program history, because these kids just everything matters to them. So
And
I
so
kind of,
much of that athletics, I mean, the academic stuff, like you're talking to one of the worst test takers ever, but a work ethic through the roof. So, like, don't you think a lot of those just super competitive kids, they obviously have the grades to get into Columbia, but maybe even if they weren't like the best students, that competitiveness, once they get in the classroom, that takes them as far as they need to go.
Ryan, without a doubt. And that, it sounds bad as an employee of an Ivy League school, but the reality is the hardest part really is getting in. And that's where, like, listen, our graduation rate is high. Maybe it's 98%. Like these Ivy League schools wouldn't be the Ivies without that, right? But student athletes graduate at a higher clip than, like, they graduated 99%, right? It's an anomaly when kids come and don't graduate. So how is that possible? If we, obviously with athletics, to be competitive at any sport, we have different admission standards. And they're in line with what they need to be. And again, we don't create them. So it comes from admission. So it's fair, but it's certainly not a 1,500 on your SAT or a 34 on your ACT. So it's like, how are those kids that, like, if that's the standard that you hold everyone else to, why are these kids that test way below that able to survive? Well, it's because they know what adversity looks like. The problem with getting kids that have 36 on their ACTs all the time, they've never failed. They've never had a B. They're 4.1 on a 4.0 scale. They're number one in their class. And it's come easy. Like, the reality is, like, high school is kind of easy, depending on where you go to school. So I've gotten long-winded on this, but Ryan, you would have been fine. You would have been fine at Columbia. Everyone, the reality is, like, if you're willing to do the work, you'll be fine. We've got too many resources, like the resources we have here in our athletic department and in all of these schools, like, you have to try to not graduate from college. And I don't care. That's every single school right now. At the worst wrestling school in the country right now, whatever that is, you have to try to fail out of that school, or the worst academic school that has wrestling. Like, you have to try, because you have an academic advisor, you've got free tutors, like, all this stuff isn't groundbreaking. So it's really how hard you're willing to work. And if you are willing to work, you will do it.
You mentioned the culture, and there's a lot I'm not going to be able to talk to you about today because we're winding down, but you mentioned the culture. You took over Columbia July 2016, and you've built it up, just an incredible run. This February, you had, I think, 6 or 7 guys ranked in the top 25, which was the most in program history. You're taking on Michigan, you're taking on Oklahoma State. You're an animal out there, but your culture, I heard one of the things you're big on is still competing with the guys and wrestling with the guys. What are some other components of your culture? Like, if you had to go teach a business on how to create culture.
Yeah, I think
I guess principle one, honesty. Is it commitment?
it's genuine. Like, I'm just really genuine, I think. And that can be good and bad, right? But I will say that my guys, they might not always like what I'm saying, but they always know what I'm feeling. And again, that could be a weakness as well, but, like, it's never, like, I am so committed to them and to their development. And again, like, I think they know it's off the mat too. Like, I really try to give myself. I was an athlete. I know how selfish you have to be. I was selfish as an athlete, but I truly believe as a coach, like, we are here to be selfless. And I give a lot, and I think, like, it's hard to hide effort, right? And that's where, like, coach always has. You're always going to have kids that perform well, but I have a lot of favorites on this team that don't even start. And I try to recognize them as much as possible for their effort, because we can't do squat without having those guys. And you brought up our banquet in the beginning, and, like, the whole centerpiece around, like, what I tried to say in our, just our summary, kind of like where we're at, and like, kind of the direction of the program. We're there for everyone else, like, or we're there because of everyone else. And it's because of those guys that, Matt Casimir is able to go on and win an EIWA title. And Josh Ogunsanya is doing, qualifying for the world team trials. And we have like, that's the stuff. And we got to recognize hard work. Like I will always be a guy that respects hard work and doing the job the way it's supposed to be done. And there's a lot of ways to do the right thing, and there's a lot of ways to do the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, there's really only two groups. There's right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it. But you got to live it too, you know. And I hold myself pretty accountable, and I'm not unwilling to say when I'm wrong. You know, I might fight it, but when I mess up, I come to these guys and I tell them, like, I messed up, and I will do it differently in the future. But I think it's about relationships, man, and that's it. And I'm a real guy. I'm a real, you know, not dude. I'm not you know, playing to the generation, but it's like I'm a real guy. I really care about them, and
Mm-hmm.
that, like, when we're talking about recruiting, it's like that's the stuff. If that resonates with the families, I know it's going to be a good fit. So like the kids we have in this program, like that has resonated with them. Like the fact that, like, I'm gonna get your back, but we're gonna have hard days, we're gonna have good days. But the reality is, like, I really invested, and all I ask is that you're invested in return. And win, lose, or draw, we'll be fine. You know, I'm good enough at recruiting to get guys that will be the guy. But I need you all in. And if we have that, then we're going to be just fine. And I think there's enough case study of that on the team. And the longer I've been here, the longer they've realized, like, man, he's hard in practice, and he holds me accountable, but he is saying the truth. Like when I lose, if I compete hard, he's going to be happy, you know?
Yeah.
So there's enough proof in the pudding where I think I have built up credibility where it carries me through.
I love it. And thanks for sharing that, because that's obviously a key cornerstone of the success you guys have had there is the philosophy and the culture. And it's just cool to see that Columbia, you know, when I first started researching this morning, I thought you guys were like, I think it's St. John's or St. Joe's. It's like downtown in the Loop, Chicago, but like downtown New York. But you guys are actually, you have grass on the campus, and it's kind of away from the financial district. Is that right?
Yeah, it's uptown. I think that's the biggest battle we're always fighting. Everyone thinks they know New York City, right? Because they've heard of New York City, and just like it's like a prejudice in a sense, you know. It's like used against us in a recruiting process. People have no idea. The same way I don't know what it's like to grow up in a cornfield in Iowa. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we want to try and eliminate that judgment. And our biggest thing is come out and see campus. I get it. If nothing else, you and your folks should come out to New York City, see what it's like. But the reality is, we're not like NYU, who's down in like, you can't distinguish between buildings and academic,
Right.
you know, buildings. For us, we have a campus. We're certainly an urban school, but we're one of the smallest, most compact schools in the country. It's like we have 6,000 undergrads, and our undergraduate campus is 6 blocks long, which, like, it's a quarter mile by 2/10 of a mile. So it's pretty deceptive. And that's where, whether we get kids or not, it's funny because they always leave with a better taste in their mouth. They always leave satisfied with what they got. And yeah, you know, maybe not for me, but it's definitely better. It's better than I thought it was going to be. So it's kind of like an ace in our sleeve. And some kids fall in love with it, man. And that's it.
Man, the other ace is that you go to Columbia, you're getting paid when you graduate. I mean, that's got to be another thing is, I mean, anyone in the business world or anyone who's, you know, now trying to get a job just can understand that there's certain schools you go to, whether it's Wharton or whatever, you know, there's a couple in there that you're in a different group of alumni when you graduate. And that's everything for getting a job. It's the relationships in that alumni group.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a no brainer.
that is the niche, right? And you mentioned a couple other schools, and it's true. And that's where that's where we have something to sell. And that's where I'm grateful to be a part of a program where there is something to sell. I think, you know, when I was looking at jobs and places that I could call home, you know, the Ivy League has a lot to sell. We have something other than wrestling to pitch. So like the Big Ten is its own pitch. You know, it's the best wrestling conference in the country, and I don't have any shame in saying that as as a coach in another conference, right? But we can call and say that we have this academic side that will set them up for the rest of their lives. And that's kind of the coolest thing, man, because there are some kids that we recruit where this could like significantly change the trajectory of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like leaving an impact, and to be a part of that. Because the truth is we're gonna coach a lot more guys. And I don't care if it's Tom Brands, if it's Kale Sanderson, it's like you're gonna coach more guys that aren't national champs and aren't all Americans than you are that get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be some experience. There's got to be some other things, development, and I know those coaches do that as well. But like that, it certainly matters to me too. Like, so it's an experience here, and then they leave with having hopefully changed the trajectory of their lives. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that.
Absolutely. And Coach, you've been so gracious with your time. We usually don't go this long, but I'm having so much fun chatting it up with you. I want to ask you about one last thing, then we'll wind it down. And you talk about points in life changing career trajectories. I got to imagine that when you were at Hofstra, you had been there 4 or 5 years, you become the interim head coach. And I'm asking because I literally don't know the answer to this. Did you think you had a legit shot at getting that job, or you knew that they were not going to look at you as the head coach?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that I was in a position to get that job.
Talk us through that and how you handled that.
Well, what I'll say is this: I knew that Hofstra wouldn't have, like, Hofstra wasn't my end goal. It wasn't right. Like being the head coach at Hofstra, although maybe convenient, like wasn't the answer to me at the time. And I've said it all along. And even coming to Columbia, I didn't apply for the Columbia job. They sought me out, but it made a lot of sense. It made a lot more sense than Hofstra did. But I love coaching, and I know I'm a leader. And what does that mean? I elicit followership. But the reality is I never needed to be a head coach. And I enjoy being a head coach, but the reality is really like I wanted to learn more. And I felt like, whether it was administratively or I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get too in the weeds on the actual specifics, but the reality, sure. It was time for, it was a good run and we did some really good things and I had some great guys. And man, I had a Hofstra guy, he's getting married this weekend and I'm driving back from last chance qualifier. And I had 3 guys, 2 of which were all American, or it's just like, wow, they're FaceTiming me. Can't believe it. Like they're, like that stuff. There was a really awesome time in my coaching career, but the reality was I saw myself going onto different things, and getting back to the Big Ten was something that was important to me. And I feel like I learned a lot there. And as I mentioned, this job presented itself to me and for my wife, and for us to kind of get our own start. And then we started our family. It made a lot of sense growing up 25 minutes away from where I live, and, one of 6. So most of my family is here still. So it made a lot of sense, but
it's cool that Joe Dubuque left and he's an edge guy. You go to Hofstra, Joe Dubuque goes to Indiana, then you end up in Purdue, also in Indiana. It's like a lot of edge connections throughout this whole thing.
Yeah. Let's set that record straight real quick. If Joe does listen to this, I will Donkey Kong Joe. I mean, Donkey Kong Joe. And maybe we do a little event, right? I'm calling you out, Joe. I'll take care of you real quick. I saw that last match you had with Flieger. I'm taking you down.
Let's do it. This could be on Stalemate Street League.
That's right. No, Joe, it is funny what you say. And it's, I call it the universe. My wife and I, like, it's just how the universe works out. And Joe's in a great place. Joe is about as close to the guy that I have in this sport. I love him. I love Jamie, his wife, and his kids. Like, we're involved. He's turning 40 here next week. I'll be in his at his birthday party. So he's my man. But it was cool to take that job after he went back to Indiana. And then, we followed similar trajectories for sure.
Yeah, I forgot that he's at obviously Princeton now. So you're both in the Ivy going at it, probably not even too far away from each other.
No,
Couple
nope,
hours. Yeah.
not even. Yeah, we're an hour. I mean, we're 50 minutes away from each other. So,
Love it, man. It's just crazy to see how stars align like that.
well,
Well,
yeah.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. Anything else you wanted to hit on that we haven't got to yet, my man?
No, Ryan. Hey, listen, this show's great. You've doing a good service for wrestling, man. I think this is cool and hearing people's stories. So appreciate all you do and what you're bringing. So thank you so much for having me on.